This is a success story, a good feeling story. Ospreys are doing good worldwide. Ospreys are basically doing good as a species after being the canary in the coal mine, along with some other raptors, when DDT and other pesticides were developed right after the Second World War. And as I was looking at some of the DDT stuff, it's just incredible how fast we as humans must have accepted that untested technology and spread that chemical, because it was a very widespread decline in birds that had adverse effects by this pesticide. It's a good story. Ospreys and other birds have recovered. Osprey and eagles, their populations since the 70s have been going uphill. In Wisconsin, we have one of the longest running surveys of wildlife, in that we fly eagles and ospreys. In the Osprey recovery plan, the goal was 300 nesting pairs or territories in the state, and we met that about 1989. And in 2016 was the last osprey flight, which recorded 558 osprey nests, occupied territories. So this is, basically double, and it's a minimum count. There are ospreys out there nesting that we don't know about, and that's a good thing. Predators and competition, initially that wasn't an issue, but as the eagle population increased, there tended to be some competition there. So part of what we've done is trying to see, can we prove that ospreys are the actual limiting factor of ospreys where they have declined a little bit or stopped, expanding. And we haven't got a black and white answer to that. We actually did a camera study. What we found was that our prey delivery rate, so that's the number of times that the male, who did 90-some% of the feeding, the number of times he'd bring food back, was kind of normal to what we found in the literature. Not a lot of information out there, but it was normal. And but what we found was, as the chicks got older, the prey actually got smaller. When the chicks were large, their greatest nutrition need is when they're growing flight feathers, when they're growing the wing feathers and the tail feathers, and they're still growing in body weight and stuff. So that's when they really, really need a lot of nutrients. And all of a sudden, instead of these 17, 18-inch northerns, they're bringing these 4-inch bluegills. And the prey delivery rate was just fine, but it actually numerically came out that as these chicks got bigger, they were actually getting less nutrients every day. A couple things that we found with the cameras. First of all, I thought ospreys, they're pretty cool critters, and they must be good parents. Not the best. If it's raining, the female will cover the chicks. If it's cold, she'll brood them. But when it comes time to feed, the male brings in a fish, and she starts tearing it apart. When the chicks get older, sometimes the male will too, but initially it's just the female. And she just sits there and tears it, and if the chick doesn't come and get it, it doesn't get fed. And so the biggest, the strongest, pretty much got fed first before the next one and then the next one, unless she's tearing it apart quick enough. But by the time they were 5-6 days old, from this camera, we could tell which ones were going to die as runts. Like I say, we learned a lot about the individual birds' behavior when they're nesting and stuff. Our goal eventually was, are the eagles the issue in certain areas? And it was hard to prove, because you've got the camera focused on the nest. It's a food habitat study, and you don't know if the birds are being harassed, and that's why the male hasn't brought a prey item in a while. And our interns and folks working on these, when you're around a nest, of course, you're paying attention. And if if ospreys could see an eagle from their nest, the male took off after it and went out of sight quite frequently. So part of it is just the male osprey not having enough time to keep feeding or keep hunting, because he's off chasing eagles. And there is some direct competition. We think, especially with younger eagles that aren't good at getting their own food, that they harass the ospreys more and steal food. And there's been a little bit of direct predation, but not much, as far as eagles actually killing nestling ospreys. So what we've been doing for our management is trying to move any new osprey platforms. Do not go within like a half mile of an eagle nest. And then if we're just putting them out blind, we put them on little lakes that are out, removed from the big lakes that attract eagles. So that's kind of what we're doing to maybe alleviate that little issue.
How old will an osprey get to be?
With our banding and the color marking, we did recapture a couple birds that had been banded as chicks by Sergei Pasfahali from Michigan. He's passed away a couple years ago. So we knew when they were hatched, and when they were 18 years old, they disappeared. And we had several of those, and we had maybe one of our own too that we knew how old it was. And then, you know, a 20-year-old osprey would be ancient, but a 10-year-old, the few adults that we caught, they kept coming back, and 10, 12 years old easily. And then we just lost track of them. We couldn't confirm that they had died, but I think an 18-year-old osprey is pretty old.
How are ospreys banded, and how do you catch them?
Okay, good question. In our study, we banded about 524 nestlings and about 12 adults. The nestlings, you get someone who's really brave to climb up there and grab the chicks, put them in a bag, they rappel down to the ground where I sit on the ground and band them. And they're a raptor, so they take, and the band is, the osprey size is a size 8. It's a lock-on band, which means you put it on and then you crimp it over with vice grips so that they can't pull it apart with their talons or their beak, which is really strong. And so that's typical of the raptors. You put a lock-on band. And then we were putting those color bands on, which you open them up, put them on, and you use super glue, or you can use an acetate that melts the plastic together. And so those bands are put on if you're using a color band. That's how we do that. The other ones, we put a dome that's the same diameter as the nest, and it's so high, and it's got fish nooses. And if you ever heard of a boscha tree, that's a trap with nooses with mice in it or house sparrows, and that's how you catch adult hawks and owls for banding. With this, what we did first is we took the eggs out, put them in an insulated container, and put fake eggs in. So during this process, they didn't get damaged. And they shouldn't have, but we didn't want them to. And then you put the noose over, and so the female comes back to get at her chicks and tend the nest, and she's trying to get through this chicken wire dome that's got these nooses, and her feet get tangled. And then when she's tangled, the climber has to come all the way down. We tried hiding them below the nest, and the adults wouldn't come back. They have to see the person climb down and leave. So then but we leave a rope, so it's safer. And then the climber has to go all the way back up, grab that adult, control it, put it in a canvas bag, and lower it. So the adults are really tricky.